Good afternoon. So, about 5-6 years ago, maybe a little longer, I had this client who was developing this cryptocurrency exchange. I can't tell you who it is. You know, they're one of the early ones and one of the successful ones. And this funny thing happened. I noticed that every 3 or 4 months, there would be a new in-house general counsel. I didn't understand that at first. I had to go through, re-educate, the new person that came in. Just when we were finally got up to speed and all the rules were, next thing you know, there'd be another new in-house general counsel. This went on again and again, over and over. Why do you suppose that is? Well, I think it's because it took them about that long to figure out that if you're general counsel for Uber, Airbnb, or even Facebook, if you make a mistake, maybe you pay a little fine. If you're a money services transmitter, you make a mistake, you might go to jail. The regulations in this space can be very onerous, right? They can be very intrusive. I want to talk a little bit about the law of crypto tokens and ICOs. I've only got a few minutes, so 13 minutes or so I'm going to hit the high points. By the way, this is not legal advice. No lawyer. I can't even see that. So the regulatory climate here, I'll just tell you there's a lot of uncertainty here in the U.S. around the treatment of crypto and tokens generally. And we've seen the SEC issue lots of warnings. We've seen no act. We've seen the SEC commence what they call enforcement actions, and they've shut down abusive schemes. And you've been here all day, so you know that the nature of BlockChain, anonymous, it's under pseudonymous, it lends itself to abuses. And there have been lots of abusive schemes, and that's what the SEC has gone after. Now the good news is that the SEC has generally taken a somewhat of a hands-off approach. They haven't really gone after anybody who hasn't really been involved in a fraudulent or abusive scheme. And then even in their pronouncements, I'd say they've been rather restrained. And there are now 2 task forces within the SEC studying this issue, so hopefully we'll get some real law that we can sink our teeth into. Right now, what we've got is new wine and old bottles. We've got old law, some of it 80 years old, that we're dealing with, 33 Securities Act, 25 years old, that we're dealing with, that we're trying to apply to something that nobody could even imagine, when those laws were enacted. But that's what we have to deal with. But there is some lore that is being developed, there are some best practices, and that's what we're dealing with right now. The other thing I want to mention about this is whenever you hear people talk about the regulatory environment, or the legal environment, we talk a lot about what these agencies, especially the SEC, does. It's kind of crazy. I've been doing this for 30-some years, and it's kind of nuts the way people put so much weight on every little thing that not even the commissioner of the SEC, but the staff people might say on a stage like this, some indication as to where it's going. That's not how law should be made, or how people how to run their businesses. But we do put a lot of weight on what the SEC says, because they are the regulatory agency for securities transactions. With somebody else you have to be a lot more worried about than that. More than the FTC, more than the CFTC, the way I mentioned, the Commodities Futures Trading Corporation, even more than FinCEN, the Department of Treasury that regulates currencies. And that's people like me, private attorneys. Because that's who's been causing the most trouble in this space from where I sit. Now, I represent companies. I'm working with Ann on the Ultra Fund as well, so I work with investors as well. But I've done lots of ICOs. And the people I worry most about, are the private potential plaintiffs, private litigants. You call them customers, I call them potential plaintiffs. Because they're the people who are going to use these laws to wreak havoc on a company if something isn't done correctly. So the big picture item here, though, is that the SEC, there have been a lot of pronouncements. They haven't really completely cleared up what the rules are with respect to these. Now, before I move on to some of the other, just beyond the regulatory side, there's really 3 federal agencies mostly. One is the SEC, they regulate securities. Another one is the CFTC, they regulate commodities. Like Ann said, there's a recent court opinion that says that cryptocurrency may be a commodity, may be subject. What we mean by that, it may be subject to regulation by that agency. And then thirdly, there's FinCEN, Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. They regulate currency. Those are the three big ones. Now you could run into trouble with FTC if you have famous celebrities doing endorsements. You could run into trouble with some consumer agencies. You know, real estate, you've heard about asset-backed tokens, real estate-backed tokens. So there are other regulatory agencies, but those are the big three. There's a fourth one everybody forgets about, but I never do. I think about it all day. First thing I think of in the morning. That's the IRS. The taxation of the sale of these tokens. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about tax today. I've got hours of presentation on this that I do, and hours of slides. One thing I do want to let you know that if you're involved in coins, tokens, digital assets of any kind, just keep in mind there's a right way to do this and a wrong way to do this. There's a way that you can sell these tokens and pay maybe 0% tax. There's a way that you can sell them and pay 37% plus state. More companies do it the wrong way. I'll just tell you that. So maybe one day I'll come back and talk more about tax. But those are the three main agencies. Now, I've heard some questions earlier about, well, gee, you know, who has the primary jurisdiction? How do we know who's going to regulate us? What is it? So again, this is where it's more war than law. Last February, there's a letter to Senator Wyden. Discussing the current regulatory environment. And this letter is a very famous letter, February 18th. And it sets out a few different parameters here. And then since then, there have been some SEC pronouncements. So let me kind of give you the lore. Even though, theoretically, these tokens can be regulated by all three of those agencies, as a general rule, somebody's going to assume primary jurisdiction, and when they do, the other regulatory agencies are going to stand down. So what you have is a security, and it is regulated as a security, generally FinCEN will not step in. We'll just assume that the regulatory structure for security is sufficient to protect the buyers. If on the other hand, if what you have is a currency, and it's not a security, so like Bitcoin, let's use an example, like crypto, then the SEC is not going to regulate it, and that means FinCEN will step in and regulate it. And by the way, that's way worse, right? Because if it's a currency, not only do you have FinCEN, you've got the money transmitter or money regulation laws of all of the states you have to deal with. And that's a way bigger headache than trying to deal with just state securities laws of all the states, which we're used to doing. And then on top of that, you've always got CFTC, Commodities Future Trading Commission, which is oftentimes involved, especially in crypto funds, whenever somebody is trading derivatives on commodities, rather than what they call spot transactions, which they always are. So it's a little bit of a complex environment. One thing all three of those agencies have said, this is really interesting, is that how heavy a hand they take in this depends on the number of factors, but they're very concerned about AML. You know what I mean by AML? Anti-money laundering. Very concerned. The SEC has said that. Said, you know, we're going to consider these things to be abusive if there's not appropriate anti-money laundering procedures put in place. And you've probably heard already today from some of the technical people that that's a problem that's pretty easily solved through technology now. There's a couple of interesting things that the states are doing that's worth talking about. The Delaware BlockChain initiative, Delaware is committed to using blockchain technology, so they've implemented it right into their code. So there's now a blockchain initiative where Delaware wants to be the first state to allow companies to issue stock, not the old-fashioned way with the paper ledger and paper certificates, but on the blockchain. And I can tell you that that would be so cool, you know, as a lawyer, to not have to deal with these dueling spreadsheets. And you would be surprised if even the most sophisticated biggest corporations that screw up their ledgers regularly. It's just hard to do. Mistakes are common, they're rampant. So this is one of the initiatives that Delaware is working on. There's some technical problems in that legislation, by the way, but they'll soon be fixed. Smart records technology with regard to archival documents. I'll come back to that, maybe not. Smart UCC filings. Delaware's BlockChain initiative. You know what a UCC is? That's the document that you file with the Secretary of State to record the granting of a security interest. And since most corporations these days are incorporated in Delaware, Delaware gets a lot of UCC filings because that's the jurisdiction you have to be filed in. You can imagine that to be able to move this on to the blockchain would make. And by the way, this is where blockchain is really powerful, I think. It's just enabling smart contracts, just really empowering it. I mean, we've had smart contracts for a long time. With blockchain, you can all be very automatic now. And this is a case where that's true, enabling UCC filings. What else do we have? Wyoming I want to mention. You know, I hear a lot of people talking about Wyoming, and people are very interested in the crypto-friendly environment in Wyoming. And the idea that they've really got almost a hands-off approach to cryptocurrencies, except for Wyoming Money Transmitter Act, which is really significant. One little problem in that is that going to Wyoming does not get you out of federal regulation. Last time I checked, it was still in the United States. Maybe they'll succeed, you know, none of them work. But you don't have to worry too much about state regulation, and a lot of my clients are organizing in Wyoming for that purpose. Just around the world, I'm a big fan of Switzerland. I do a lot of deals for Switzerland. They have a real progressive attitude towards cryptocurrency regulation, especially if what you have is a utility token. Everybody know what I mean by utility token? So there's really, I view it as, there's lots of different kinds of tokens, but let's say there's two kinds. There's utility and security token. There's also payment tokens, but let's say a utility token is a token that you can borrow and you can exchange for some utility. The question you had earlier about if I pay 25 cents for a token, what do I get for that? Well, with the utility token, you get whatever that token is exchangeable for. If it's a law token, you get 25 cents worth of my time, okay? Something like that. That's different than a security token. That's a token that there's, well, as a lawyer, when I say security token, I mean a token that is treated as a security for U.S. laws. When other people, when you as business people say security token, you might mean a token that has no utility. It just participates in the appreciation, the earnings, maybe some sort of interest factor, some sort of right to distributions of the underlying company. So it looks a lot like stock or even debt. So if you're in Switzerland, you got a utility token. That's a pretty good jurisdiction. It's relatively expensive. If you're in Switzerland or if you're in Europe and it turns out what you've got is a security token, I'm probably going to urge you to go to Liechtenstein, which is right next door. Singapore, I'm a big fan of Singapore. I'm probably doing most of my deals through Singapore these days, especially for companies. I like to look where the business is. You know, what sort of makes sense? And for businesses that are going into Asia, or have a lot of Asian investors, I like Singapore. It's relatively inexpensive. We do have some law there. They have some rules. Again, there is this distinction between utility and security tokens, and utility tokens are far less regulated than security tokens in Singapore, but still it's a relatively hands-off place. There was a time when, in fact, I think Ethereum is a Swiss foundation, where people were setting up Swiss foundations, or I'm sorry, Singapore foundations to do their ICOs, to do their token offerings. I don't think that really helps, to tell you the truth. It might, if they tell me it's a foreign law matter, it avoids a lot of the Singapore securities regulation issues, but I don't think it's really necessary anymore now that we've got this infrastructure in place. Actually, on the 11th, doing another program with a Singapore lawyer on doing international ICOs through Singapore. If anybody's interested, let me know. South Korea, we've heard a lot about, because you remember back in January, they issued this ruling disallowing accounts from trading cryptocurrencies. This is one of those places where we see a lot of activity. I guess more that you're hearing about these days is Malta. That's the latest company that we hear lots of discussion about, an early pioneer. And they now have several legislation because they want Malta to be the cryptocurrency king. I will tell you from experience, it's just taken a long time to get approvals in Malta. So I'm not going through Malta, Gibraltar, if we're going to be just doing something like that. You know, the last thing I'll leave you with, this isn't regulation, but the last two things. I just want to mention, you know, people don't ever get to the licensing and patenting part of this, but this is way too much material to go through. But just keep in mind that if you're in a business of developing blockchain technology, pay attention to your IP, right? And I know people kind of have this knee-jerk reaction at, well, gee, everything we're doing is open source. Fine. So we don't have to have licenses. No, that's not how it works, okay? You do want to have licenses to what unique IP you're developing, and you may have something patentable. And that's something you want to pay attention to as the market gets more competitive. The second thing, it's not up here, but it's kind of an interesting side. Okay, thank you. Is copyright. You know, we've got this whole body of copyright law in the United States. Because think about what your company's doing. People are able to transfer. So I see blockchain, where the internet allows you to transfer information over the web. I see blockchain is allowing you to transfer products digitally. That product may contain copyrighted information. And we have this whole body of law in the United States, you know, for many years. And it took, remember Napster? Since then, we've kind of updated it for the internet age on what gets copyright protection. Well, blockchain's going to disrupt all of that now. Because, further to your question, if you have a copyright violation through blockchain technology, who are you going to sue? You know, or how are you going to enforce it? Is somebody going to go out and sue 1,000 nodes? So that's an issue you just might want to put a pin in if you're in the kind of company that's dealing content. And what else have I not talked about here? So that's us. We're a Silicon Valley-based law firm. We do quite a bit of work in the space. I also teach a class on blockchain for business for Stanford Continuing Studies, and I've partnered up with Ann as well at Ultra Fund to guide them in their initiative. So I have maybe 1 minute left if anybody has any questions. Yes, sir.
Thank you. The question here is that you see from a professional point of view, would you see eventually all these coins being issued, for example, like at an ICO exchange in America, would also be honored by other ICO exchanges outside of America?
Thanks very much. I meant to get to that because I heard you ask that question earlier. The thing about exchanges, boy, what a rabbit hole to go down. So let me step back. By the way, this is not new. You know, as a lawyer, I've dealt with this issue my whole career. What happens if you have your securities on an unregistered exchange? So here's the thing. Every ICO token offering, there ought to be, everybody's taking a little bit of a leap of faith when you buy one of these tokens that you're going to be able to get liquidity, to be able to exchange it and put it, list it on an exchange, okay? And your PPM or your white paper or something ought to say, by the way, Mr. Purchaser, when you buy your token, you're taking a leap of faith. And there's going to be a regulatory environment in place that's going to allow you to get liquidity. So the SEC regulates exchanges. Okay, they regulate securities of U.S. companies or U.S. persons traded on exchanges. And the way they do it either has to be a regulated exchange, which is really difficult. It's a really difficult thing to do. Or it has to be in what they call an alternative trading platform. And which is a lot easier, but just 2 weeks ago, the SEC just boom, turned out 3 applications, because they were unhappy with the AML compliance procedures. So that's becoming a lot harder than people think. Now I know they're out there, and I couldn't tell you who they are because every time I do, when I double check, it turns out they haven't gotten their license yet, so I'm not going to mention any names. But you're taking a little bit of risk with these things that are going to have to be traded. Now you as the company, I'm assuming most of you folks are with companies that do blockchain, right? or maybe you're investors. But either way, you still want to be careful about this because of the nature of blockchain. There's just no way of controlling after the restrictions come off. You know, where those tokens are going to end up, right? So they could end up on these exchanges. And I think what I counsel my clients is that if you're a company, just don't facilitate that. You know, just don't be a party to that. That's the best we can do at this point. And tell people that they might subject themselves to all sorts of rules. And if you're the investor, I don't know if I've got good advice for you. All I can say is that this is one of those areas that's rapidly developing, and we're all just hoping we're going to have, you know, really good, big, powerful, regulated exchanges that everybody can trade on. Anything else? Yes, sir.
In the long run, suppose that all the companies. Suppose that in the long run, the companies can actually issue tokens that represent their securities. Do you think that the law has to change? Because now it's not the 19th century or 20th century, that's 21st century, right? Should we follow the guidelines that's kind of issued before the information age, or then right now when the tokens can be globalized, it can be traded anywhere without any borders, contrary to the stocks that basically it's usually traded within a nation. So the tokens are, from the first day, it's global, because you can trade anywhere you want, as long as you have internet. So do you think the legal authority should also study this and see maybe there's better ways to look at it and just follow whatever was in existence?
Yeah, no, you're right. The law has to change. It's kind of like Ann said earlier. Very few of these deals are actually ICOs, public offerings. They're private offerings. And non-accredited that means most people cannot get into them. They're prohibited by law from getting into them. That's the problem in Silicon Valley. That's what Ann's fund is formed to solve. It's always been a problem here is that, if you're a big VC and you're accredited, then you've got access. But if you're not accredited, the government is here to protect you. It's going to keep you from making that investment, even though you want to. You can go spend your money in Las Vegas. The government says that's okay. You can't put it into a token. The law has to change, because when those rules were developed back in the 30s, we had a much different environment. It was really hard to get information out of companies. We had an internet. You couldn't immediately find out all this information. You couldn't go and search, you couldn't crowdsource information, you couldn't do any of that. So I think the law is going to change to make it a little easier for everybody to invest, so we don't have to run through this crazy quilt of procedures, regulations, and pushing everything offshore, which is what we do now in order to comply. I hope that was responsive to your question. I see my time's up. I want to thank you for being a good audience.